12th century Jerusalem is a fragile, isolated strip of land. It is a highly contested fortress pressed against the Mediterranean Sea, completely surrounded by enemies. Holding a city like this requires absolute, unwavering physical strength from its ruler. But at 9 years old, the Prince of Jerusalem starts exhibiting a terrifying anomaly. While wrestling with other boys in the courtyard, they dig their nails into his right arm. He doesn't flinch. His tutor brings him inside and holds a lit candle close to his skin. Nothing. The boy feels absolutely no pain. This medical diagram illustrates the grim reality of a 12th century leprosy diagnosis. It shows a human arm undergoing the progressive destruction of peripheral nerves and flesh. For anyone else in this era, it is a guaranteed death sentence, promising total physical collapse and immediate exile to a colony outside the city walls. But this boy is the heir to the throne. 4 years later, the geopolitical stakes reach a breaking point. The king dies of dysentery on a northern campaign. At just 13 years old, the crown passes to a child with a disease that is actively eating him alive from the inside out. He is now entirely responsible for the defense of the holiest city on earth. Meanwhile, out in the desert, the era's most capable warlord is mobilizing. Saladin is methodically unifying the fractured Muslim world under one banner. He has a singular, driving objective: retaking Jerusalem. This creates a brutal mathematical problem. You have a terminal king whose body is slowly destroying itself, ruling a besieged kingdom, facing the greatest general in the known world. The board is perfectly set for an inevitable massacre. Baldwin understood that ultimate victory was impossible. He knew the clock was ticking. From the moment he took the throne, his reign became a desperate, transactional campaign. He would have to buy time for his kingdom using his own decaying flesh as currency. By the time Baldwin is 16, Saladin crosses the border with an overwhelming invasion force. The warlord naturally assumes the sick teenage boy king will retreat and hide behind the massive stone walls of Jerusalem. This visualization maps out the terrifying odds of that day. On one side, Saladin arrives with a massive force of 26,000 soldiers. Defending Jerusalem, Baldwin has a meager force of just 375 knights. It is a crushing 69-to-1 numerical disparity. Instead of retreating, Baldwin makes a massive tactical gamble. He rides out, intercepts Saladin in the open desert near Mont Gassard, and launches a devastating surprise charge straight into the center of the Muslim army. The reality of this charge is visceral. The king's arm is so numb and weak that he cannot even grip his horse's reins. He rides at the front of the vanguard with his shield strapped directly to his dead arm, leading a collision of steel and desert sand. The impact shatters Saladin's army. Thousands are killed, the survivors scatter into the desert, and the legendary warlord himself barely escapes the massacre on the back of a racing camel. Baldwin rode back to Jerusalem a hero, but the victory required a transaction. He had permanently exhausted a massive portion of his remaining physical mobility to purchase his kingdom its first major extension of life. The disease rapidly accelerates. By age 20, his limbs are paralyzed. Deep sores open across his skin, and bandages cover most of his body. To hide his collapsing face from the court, he begins wearing a cold, silver mask. As the king rots on the throne, the internal political rot begins. Vultures start circling. Factions split the court, led primarily by his sister's new French husband, a highly ambitious knight positioning himself to steal the crown. Baldwin's body is failing, but his mind remains sharp. He publicly humiliates the French knight, strips him of his authority, and hands power to a solid, experienced, unglamorous lord from the northern territories to act as regent. At 21, Baldwin is forced to confront Saladin one last time. A massive army has arrived to lay siege to a vital fortress near the Sea of Galilee, betting that the crippled king finally lacks the strength to intervene. Baldwin hasn't walked in months. He cannot grip a sword, he cannot sit on a horse, so he forces his servants to place him on a wooden litter, and he orders his army to carry him to the absolute front lines of the battlefield. Saladin sees the banners of Jerusalem approaching. He remembers the massacre at Montchaussard. Staring down an army led by a paralyzed king on a stretcher, the most powerful warlord in the Middle East refuses to fight. He turns his massive army around and walks away. This was Baldwin's second great transaction. He spent the absolute last spark of his physical presence, weaponizing awe and sheer intimidation to force a geopolitical stalemate without swinging a single sword. By age 22, the light is completely gone. Baldwin rules from a bed in total darkness. He is blind, his body swollen and unrecognizable, and every breath he takes is pure agony. Operating entirely through dictated letters and whispered reports, he makes one final, desperate political transaction. He directly crowns his infant nephew as co-king, forcing the barons to swear binding oaths of absolute loyalty to the child, building a fragile legal wall to bypass the destructive French knight. At 24 years old, the transaction is finally complete. After holding the throne for 11 years, Baldwin's body completely gives out, and the pain stops. The immediate tragedy of his story lies in what happens next. Just 2 years after Baldwin's death, the political oaths break. The French knight seizes power, makes a fatal tactical error at the Horns of Hattin, and loses Jerusalem entirely to Saladin. The kingdom of Jerusalem was always a fragile sandcastle, and Saladin was the inevitable tide. The math was always going to catch up to them. Baldwin's 11 years on the throne serve as evidence that sheer human willpower can stall the ticking clock of history. He took a terminal diagnosis and a surrounded city, and he purposely chose to buy time with his own blood when stronger men would have surrendered in their sleep.